dark crystal.
Welcome back to the channel, folks, and today I'm returning back to the world of Thra and the Dark Crystal. As I'm sure you all know by now, Netflix is releasing a prequel series to the Dark Crystal dubbed Age of Resistance, which will likely take place during the beginning of the Garthim War, or just prior. That's my personal guess, and if you aren't aware of this series, I will leave a link to the news report I did on this down below in the description box for you all to bring up to speed on the whole premise of this series, and then also the extensive voice cast which they have got on board for the series. In my previous video exploring the lore in the world of the Dark Crystal, I discussed the Gelflings as they are front and centre in both the movie and the prequel series that we are going to be getting. Now today, I want to dive into the lore of the Skeksis, the tyrannical race that came from the stars and ruled over Thra with an iron and greedy grip. The Skeksis, from an appearance side of things, resemble a cross between reptiles and birds. They have a scaly, reptile-like body with a beak-like jaw. However, it can vary from Skeksis to Skeksis. They have heavy brow bones, and much like the urru, their physical counterpart, they also have 4 arms and a tail. Interestingly enough, the Skeksis' appearance seemed directly linked to their descent into the violent and disgusting greedy creatures they would eventually become. As the urseks split into the two beings, the urru and the Skeksis were initially quite beautiful looking beings. They were vibrant, agile, and brightly coloured. As the years went on though, and their greed and malice grew, as did the ugly and withering aesthetics. The Skeksis' counterpart, the urru, when they die, would merely evaporate, a reflection of their soul. The Skeksis themselves though, having no soul, would just turn to dust. This being another indication of the Skeksis and urru being the two halves of one being. The urru, the literal soul of the ursek, and the Skeksis being the darker, the malevolent and greedy side to the ursek. The division of the urseks led to 2 completely different beings and 2 completely different cultures. The Skeksis, culturally, are ruled by power and greed. They viewed the division as a triumph, a win, something to be proud of. They had absolutely no intention of rejoining with their counterparts the urru, and they began seeking out power. The urru, who were also seeking power, split off in their own personal search. The Skeksis' view on power was the domination of others, and the urru, their view of power was spiritual enlightenment. The flamboyant robes and outfits that the Skeksis wore were in part to reflect their personalities, along with being a symbol of their power and status among their peers. The art and architecture of the Skeksis was very intricate, very flamboyant, and very over the top in all senses. Arguments among the greedy is of course common, and the Skeksis would have to settle their disputes primarily through trials of strength, such as the trial by stone, which we see in the Dark Crystal.
Trial by stone.
Trial by stone!
Trial by stone!
And the trial by fire. The Skeksis' greed is part and parcel of them. They are the embodiment of the greed of the urseks, and as such, they sought to continue their life permanently. They didn't wish to rejoin with the urru and become the whole being they were previously. They would attempt to prolong their life through numerous ways, such as absorbing light from smaller, lesser conjunctions and drinking the essence that they had extracted from the Gelflings and the Podlings. They would do these things to prolong their life, however, their biggest aim was of course to survive until the Third Great Conjunction, which would grant them immortality, provided they managed to stay alive to see it. As for the history of the Skeksis, we have to explore the history of the urseks briefly first, the beings that they formerly were. The urseks, after being exiled to Thra, spent 999 and one trine on the planet. They then decided that if they were going to be able to return to their homeworld, that they must create an intricate network of mirrors surrounding the great crystal that they had discovered. The intention was to trap the light from the great conjunctions and burn out the imperfections on their souls and return to their planet. As mentioned in my Gelfling video, the urseks invited delegates from every sentient race on Thra to watch their ascension. During the preparation time, however, and as the Great Conjunction drew closer, a Gelfling played a traditional ursek song. This caused a member of the urseks to become awash with nostalgia, allowing its darker thoughts to rise to the surface and overwhelm him. As the Great Conjunction arrived, the ursek, so filled with dark rage, prevented the entirety of the urseks from entering the crystal, cleansing themselves, and instead of ascending, they split into two beings, the urru and the Skeksis. When the Skeksis awoke, split from their counterparts, they were filled with malice, hate, and greed for each other, and especially for their urru counterparts. One Skeksi, so enraged, murdered two urru the moment he regained consciousness. Obviously, this resulted in the death of two Skeksis, himself and another. 16 Skeksis and 16 urru remained. The Skeksis then drove the urru from the castle and all of the delegates that had been invited, only leaving the mystic Aughra and her son. Aughra, in an attempt to reason with the Skeksis, tried to get them to call back the urru so they may rectify the great division that they had experienced. The Skeksis selfishly refused, and one even launched itself at the great crystal, chipping it, breaking a shard off, and ensuring that unless the shard was found, the Skeksis and the urru would never join and cleanse themselves. After all of this, the Skeksis began forming factions. One particular faction that included the Chamberlain, Skek and Skek dominated the Skeksis entirely. Skek became the emperor of the Skeksis and initially was actually a benevolent one, surprisingly. Both the Skeksis and the Gelfling lived side by side inside the castle of the crystal in peace. Now, although when they divided, the Skeksis were filled with malice and hate, when they were left alone from their counterparts, they were actually joyous creatures, bright and vibrant tempered. Though this withered with their age, as did their bodies, and they deteriorated, not only in appearance but temperament. As they aged, their greed grew, and they sought to extend their life by any means necessary. A Skeksis scientist discovered a way of extracting an elixir from sentient life forms known as essence. Their greed consumed them, and from here they began capturing Gelflings and podlings so they could prolong their life. The Skeksis discovered that the Gelflings had a prophecy of one of their race who was destined to find the shard and heal the crystal. Upon this, they created the Garthim and began the Garthim War. And from here, we then enter into the events of the Dark Crystal, and the end of the Garthim War is what we see in flashbacks in the Dark Crystal movie. So, if you'd like to learn more, please do check out the movie because it's a beautifully crafted film which is ripe for the picking for a prequel series. And as I said in my previous video on the Gelflings, and in this one, I genuinely believe that this prequel series will likely be set around the time of the Skeksis turning on the Gelfling, because it opens up a great story potential, and although we know exactly what happens ultimately to the Gelfling, we could see some great character arcs and some awesome battle sequences. I will say this, just on a purely personal note, a lot of people have gone on the previous video I did on the Dark Crystal news and all of that, just saying, oh, there's going to be an SJW nightmare. If you watch the Dark Crystal, realistically it is actually tackling some form of social justice issues, I guess you could say. So there is a precedent for this. I highly doubt that you could claim, you know, the Dark Crystal is just going to be SJW filled and all this kind of stuff, because it's inbuilt into the lore of the series. It is part and parcel of the series. It's always had this in it. If they then go off from what's been established and they don't do the Garthan War and things like that, and they create their own brand new law for it, then yeah, absolutely. I think we could then claim, you know, a bit of social justice going on there. But as is, I don't think you can really claim it because this was made, what, some 20 to 30 odd years ago now. And yeah, it's been around for a lot longer than this whole SJW outrage recently. So anyway, that does wrap it up here for me with this video. This was the Skeksis Explained. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, if you did, please do hit that like button. And if you're new here, please subscribe for more in the future. As always, I've been Mr. Age. Take care, and have a great new year.